everyone. Yes, welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. Bam! It's so simple to understand. Can't you just see it right there? Exactly, right? What a crazy, crazy thing. So, I want you to take a look at this little short video, spinning plates. And then we're going to talk about what this is all about.
If you soiled your pants, just send the bill to the casino. Plate number 5. All right. This will work. I hope. 5 plates. 5 cups. 5 spoons. Yeah.
Alright, I knew it was going to happen. We all probably knew it was going to happen. Today, the Dow Jones closed at an all-time high. We should be celebrating, pulling party poppers, sipping champagne. Isn't this just great? No, it's not. No, it's not. My prediction still stands. By the fall, which is not far away, and up to 1 year from now, we're going to have a complete and total market collapse based on February's, what do you want to call it? Well, they want to call it a correction, right? An adjustment. Anyways, a drop of just a few percent, 10%. Anyways, spinning plates. You notice how those plates, that guy is going around spinning the plates and keeping them going from one thing to the other. Well, our economy, represented by all of this, is a complete disaster. And I want to start at the very center. What goes on in our nation having to do with business, trade, banking, investing? Is it about the economy? That is me and you and our money and the world we live in, or is it about the government? You see, the government is supposed to work for us. Doesn't feel like it, doesn't act like it, doesn't sound like it even. Really, it sounds like they're more interested in the Federal Reserve and banks and corporations. Right? That's what a fascist system is about. But our economy is supposed to be about us, the people, our jobs, our companies, right? Our standard of living. So is it the economy or is it the government that's most important? Well, we know who has the power, right? And the economy actually has to do what the government says. Government makes the rules and sets everything up, and the economy tries working around it. Well, what's going on in our economy right now? Right? We've got inflation. Inflation, they're saying, oh, it's above 2%. That's exactly what they wanted, right? Well, what's that causing, right? Where'd that come from, the inflation? Quantitative easing. That means lots of money that the Federal Reserve and banks have been pumping out. Cash, cash, cash. Right? So now they're going to do quantitative tightening because we have too much inflation. They don't want it to get out of hand. And it's actually much higher than they report. Right, using the old estimating factors up around 10%. That's quite a bit. Other big factors in the economy. This is how I look at everything as best I can. Oil. It's not just what oil costs. It's just another commodity. But because it's used, it is the most useful item on the planet. Right? And silver is the second most useful, believe it or not, item on the planet. But oil is number 1, and it is critical because it powers our cars. It powers, literally, our houses. Fossil fuels, oil, right, is part of powering and delivering and manufacturing and creating everything. Farming, that's oil. Right? Then we have our medium of exchange, the dollar. Then we have where people send all their money, the Dow Jones, Wall Street. And then we have bonds, treasuries. This is how the funding for the U.S. government works, right? Then we have our competitors, Russia, China, EU. These are other zones, other, I guess you could call them economic allies, economic competitors. And then we have emerging markets, people who wish they were big enough to be over on this side, right? And then we have gold and silver, right? So, when you look here, the dollar, the medium of exchange, used to be backed by gold and silver. But in 1971, Nixon nixed that, right? He disattached it, right? Because if there's a finite amount of gold held, and the money's based on that, it's backed by it, right? It holds and locks the dollar's value in. Well, our dollar today, compared to where it was when the Federal Reserve was started, is worth about $2. They've knocked the piss out of the dollar. And it loses another 2, 5, 10% every year. So, let's look at what they're doing. I'm talking about spinning plates right at the beginning of this. We're going, okay, what is going on in the economy? Right now, the bond rate is up above 3%. What does that mean? It means the government, in order to get people to buy their bonds, right, in order to buy their bonds, they've got to offer a higher interest rate, a higher rate of return for the investor to loan money to the government, which is what a bond is, right? So in order to get people to loan, right, more money, they have to raise that rate. What does that do? It pulls money out of other parts of the economy. It does. It makes money, right? It gets more money for us, less money for the government. It costs us, the taxpayers, more in the end, right? But does that affect other things? Well, if the bond rate goes up, less money is going to go where? Into the dollar. What has the dollar done in the last couple of days? It's gotten weaker and weaker. Now, dollar getting weaker, does that really hurt me and you? Well, it doesn't make our dollar go as far when we spend with it, right? But what has it done? As this has gotten weaker, the dollar, what has that done? Emerging markets over here. Those are nations like Turkey, Argentina, Venezuela. Every country that borrows U.S. dollars, right, borrows them, their currency is weakened, so it takes more of their own currency, right? It takes more of their wealth to pay back the U.S. when they need to borrow dollars. It is all interconnected, in other words, right? So there's too much cash, we get inflation, so they go to quantitative tightening. What does that do? There's less cash out there. Everything is interconnected. It's totally interconnected, but it's not acting the same. The prices for gold and silver, they are completely pushed down. And the complaint is that it's being manipulated, the price, because they don't want people running there for safe haven. When we have a lot of inflation, right, people want to run to the U.S. bond, or they want to run to the dollar, right, because they think that holding dollars or holding bonds is going to protect them against inflation. Typically, you run to gold and silver, but it's not doing anything. It's sitting at the bottom. They're spinning the plates. But what's going on the last week? Oil has gone up again. Whew, it went up fast, up over $70. And I say it needs to go to $85 to sustain the oil industry. But the oil industry is hurt. Chevron's hurt. ExxonMobil's hurt. Oil producers, oil explorers are hurt right now. They're not making the money that they need to make. So those businesses are borrowing money. They issue their own corporate bonds, right? And so they have, say, $5 billion in debt, right? And they have to pay back these bonds that they issue for their private corporations to run their oil company. But they don't make enough profit. So next year, they take out an extra billion. So now they're in the hole $6 billion, right? They have to issue more bonds and then pay people back even more. So they're borrowing themselves into a hole, much the way American consumers, right? They do their own personal deficit spending, and their debt goes up, up, up. And they just go, well, everything's fine. I can afford the debt servicing. In the United States government, $21 trillion plus dollars. We keep spending more than they bring in. The federal government spends more than they bring in through taxation. Same with people on the street, deficit spending. They're spending more than they bring in, and they're financing it. Corporations, especially oil corporations, are doing the same thing. They're issuing bonds or stocks, dividend stocks, and to pay those dividends, to buy back those bonds, to pay them off when they come due, they've got to borrow more and more and more money. Where does that money come from? Federal Reserve, banks, corporations, right? When the interest rate is down, they can borrow cheaper. They can borrow that money cheaper, and they can extend their business out longer, right? When interest rates are 4, 6, 8, 10%, which is where they should be, corporations can't do that. It'll put them out of business. In other words, these artificially low interest rates brought on by the Federal Reserve, pumping money, QE, through banks and corporations to get more cash out there, to get people spending money, to get corporations spending money, to get corporations to borrow money, was an effort to jumpstart the economy. But it has not worked. It hasn't. Right? They brought the interest rate down so they can borrow money. Same with the federal government. They've got low interest rates they're getting from the Federal Reserve. And it's funny that our government borrows money from a private bank. And they spend way more than they get every year. Keynesian economics do not work. As evidenced by our economy. Our economy is slow. It's slow. We are in trade wars with other nations. If our economy was making a bunch of products and making a lot of wealth, producing, we wouldn't be in a trade war. We wouldn't. We would be able to buy our own products instead of buying from overseas. We would be able to sell our products overseas. We don't make a whole lot and we don't export a whole lot, which is why we have with China a $600 billion trade deficit. Meaning every year, at the end of the year, when they settle all the books, they go, whoops, the U.S. government owes $600 billion to China. There you go, right? That is a deficit to us. That is an exportation of our wealth, right? So Trump is doing tariffs, trade wars, trying to get corporations to come back to the U.S., to our economy, so we quit shipping money out. But we're not creating things. Our economy is basically kaput. It's on the ER operating table on life support. And quantitative easing is like a fluid bag full of plasma and drugs trying to keep the economy alive. Right? But if America dies, right? If we have nothing but trouble, what's the dollar going to do? Right? Is it going to go down? Is it going to go up? We don't know, because Russia, China, and the EU, they're all on the operating tables too. Russia doesn't have a huge amount of debt. China has an incredible amount of debt. In the EU, Germany, Italy, France, lots of debt. Right? Everyone is bled dry by quantitative easing. And everyone else in the world is still doing it, but here in the US, they're now trying quantitative tightening. And what's it doing? They're constricting the money supply. Right? So there's not enough money to go here or go there. So it's going to cause what? The bonds to go up, which is going to cause what? Dollar to go down. It's going to cause emerging markets to panic. And still, nothing's going on with gold and silver. This is the hodgepodge, fucked up mess that I look at every day. And if there's something starts going, the oil starts getting a little too high, well, the guy runs over and spins the oil plate and gets that price back down, because we need cheap energy to fuel what economy is left, to fuel the American consumer and make things as cheap as possible, right? Well, if the dollar starts getting too high, the guy runs over and spins that plate. We got to bring that down, right? It's a trick. They're trying to keep everybody busy. Looking here, we need the dollar down. No, it's too low. Now we need to raise it back up, right? The Wall Street. Now this is the trick. Wall Street is not the economy. The economy is corporations, private industry, mom and pop stores, house builders, mining, agriculture. That is our economy. Wall Street is where people go to compete, to bid up the price of a stock, or to say, I have that stock and I think it's going to go down, and they sell it. and they sell it to make a profit. Wall Street is not the economy. But today, Wall Street, the Dow Jones hits an all-new high. Why? 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 Well, because of all the QE, all of the cash that's out there, right, at super low interest rate. So you can, if you take your money and go to a bank, right, just a regular bank down the street, and you put it in there, and they're going to give you 0.5% interest return. But the inflation rate is 3 to 10%. You are netting a loss every day. If you send your money to Wall Street, they're telling you, oh, you'll make 7%, you'll make 12%, you'll make 20% every year. And that's the lie they tell. So you send your money to Wall Street, right? So if you're sending your money to Wall Street, what are you not doing? Well, you're not buying bonds, right? So the bonds quit getting sold. So they raise the interest rates to get more people to look at bonds as an investment, right? Right? But they do that, and it raises the interest rate, which makes it harder to finance everything else that's being done. In other words, every time that guy runs over and spins that plate, it causes a problem with another plate. Oh shit, right? The bond market, spin that plate. Oh no, look at the dollar, spin that plate. Gold and silver started moving, spin that plate, get it back down. No one look at gold and silver. It's not what you think it is. It's a barbarous relic. But right now, Russia, China, countries in the EU, even emerging market countries, if they're not so broke they can't pay back their treasuries, pay back their loans from the United States, they are buying gold and silver big time. Big time. Right? So people will not send their money to banks. They're sending it to Wall Street. What happens on Wall Street? You compete with other people to buy the same amount of stocks. And the most popular ones are the FANG stocks. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, or the Google companies, or the alphabet jerks, whatever you want to call them. And that's where the money's going, because it's not going back into banks. Banks are loaning it out to us at higher interest, right, than they get charged, right? And we send it to Wall Street, where they divvy it up and we compete, and it's making the Dow go up. But the Dow isn't up because the economy is strong. The Dow is up because there's no place to send any extra capital you have except to Wall Street or to buy bonds. And no one's buying bonds, because if you're getting bonds at 3% and the inflation rate is somewhere between 3 and 10, it's a losing proposition. Other nations, Russia, China, EU, they're not buying U.S. bonds anymore. Russia sold them back. China's getting rid of them. The EU is saying, we don't want that anymore. Right? You're killing us with your dollar. Your dollar is too valuable. Right? And meanwhile, we've got problems in Iran. Well, there's the oil price. It's going to go up. Wait a minute. Spin those plates, right? Let's get that oil price back down. While all of this is going on, if you can even manage to understand it and how everything relates to something else, how QE affects this, right? How the dollar affects that, how inflation causes this reaction. If you can understand all of that, it's important to note that the Federal Reserve is continuing to loan the United States government money that's adding to the 21 trillion. Right? So the longer they finance this game, the bigger a hole we get into. The bigger hole we get into. We have tariffs on top of all of this, trying to control trade, trying to control the bleeding, not only of the overall debt, but the bleeding of sending our money, our wealth offshore to places like China, places like the EU, right? Because we have trade deficits. And how are we doing that? Well, the Federal Reserve, the U.S. government, are printing. They were printing tons of cash, issuing tons of bonds. That's what, again, funds everything. Right? So we've got all of this cash, and we're buying all the world's assets cheap. Except, what are we doing? As people, we're going in debt, just like the government, just like corporations. Everyone is in debt. How do you service the debt? If the bond rate goes up, if the interest rate goes up, let's say it goes up to goes up from 3% up to 5%, 6%. What is the debt service going to cost? Right now, your debt may be, say, on everything you finance this month, $1,000. $1,000 just to service the mortgage, the car loan, the credit cards. If they double that, can you afford $2,000? Well, no. No, it'll kill the economy. If you go to buy a car and it's going to cost you $300 a month to buy that car with a low interest rate, if they raise that interest rate, if they double it, your payment goes from $300 to $425. All of a sudden you're like, hey, how did that happen? Well, it's just the interest rate. It's just the loan. And I've seen this happening to people who are trying to buy cars and they just go, I'm not buying the car now. Right? So what does that do? It slows down the economy. What has happened to Ford and GM this year? Ford down 25%. Right? It's either this year alone or the last 12 months. Same with General Motors. They're down very much. Not as bad as Ford, but they're bad. They're not happy. I think it's over 10. It's like 12 or 15%. Not good. Right? But this is why the average American just doesn't fucking get it. It is too confusing. Where do you put your money if you've got any extra? Do you put it in Wall Street? where you're going to pay for every $100,000, $100 a month in fees just for them to manage your money that's sitting there. And then hope it grows, right? Once you take out the fees they make, they go, oh, you're going to make 7%. It turns out, if they're taking 3.5% or 2% or whatever they take, that's your money they're taking. Well, if you're not going to buy stocks, are you going to buy bonds, treasury bonds? Are you going to do what? Keep your money in the dollar in the bank? No, right? Are you going to buy gold and silver? Well, it's real. You can buy the paper stuff on Wall Street or you can buy the real thing. Right? Gold coin, silver coin, bullion, bars, blanks, rounds. If they shut the banks down, if we have a massive problem like they did in the 30s, like they did in the 70s, like they had the banking crisis in the 80s, the banking crisis we had in 2008. If we have a banking crisis, where does your cash go? If you've got gold and silver, where does it go? You need to think about this, right? It is just a quandary, but it is the spinning plates, and I watch it every day. I'll watch one thing go up and another thing go down, and I'll notice, right, the manipulators, Wall Street manipulators, bank manipulators, Federal Reserve, government manipulators, if something starts going a little cattywampus, a little bit wonky, a little bit sketchy, right, they'll immediately do the thing it takes to correct it. But when they take something from here, it adds it over here. If they add it here, it takes it from over here. Well, the Federal Reserve, what have they promised? Well, we're raising the interest rate, right? They're trying to normalize, they're calling it. They're doing quantitative tightening. It's causing the interest rates to go up because the bond rate is going up. But they're promising if there is a falter, they're going to drop the QE hammer 100% to the floor. Bam! They're going to do it. Why? They're going to drop the rates right back to zero. They're going to pump a bunch of cash in there because it's the last thing they can do. Right? You can't fix an economy overnight. Right? You can't fix all the problems, but they can throw cash at it, and that's all they've got left. Right? And because they're tightening that up right now, it's fucking up the rest of the world. It's fucking up emerging markets and these major trade partners and areas, and it's pissing them off. It's pissing them off, right? It's hurting them. These countries are going broke, portions of them. The people are the ones who ultimately pay. Tariff on China, we pay the money for that. China puts a tariff on us, their people pay. The governments win. Again, is it the economy or is it government that matters? Right? What is more important, having a government or having an economy? Well, without an economy and just having government, what have you got? Literally, what have you got? You've got a monster that demands money, cash, and obedience, and no way to feed it. If you've got an economy with no government, right, you've got out-of-control corporations and banks screwing people over, right? But when you have what we have now, you've got government working tightly with banks, right, to keep what little economy there is left alive while they hand out money that they charge you interest rates on in order to get it back. They're sending bonds overseas to countries, and they're not buying them anymore. Now they're selling them. So all those bonds, right? In other words, those dollars are coming back, right? And that's creating inflation. It is a giant mess. It's no wonder the average human, and I can barely understand it, barely. You spend a lot of time every day going through this and looking at charts and fucking graphs and papers and trying to read and understand all this, and it is a mess. It's important to note that they can't keep it going forever, and that's what causes crashes. When something gets out of balance, right, or the plate stops spinning, it falls off the stick. Crash, crash, crash. This crashes, it can cause that to crash, it'll cause this, and you get contagion. They like to talk about contagion. And it's not just in the U.S., it goes overseas. And again, we're fucking up emerging markets with a strong dollar, even though the dollar in the last few days has gone down, which has caused the bonds to go up, right, which has caused the oil to go up. Which what? If everything's going up in price, well, that's inflation. We can't have that. We need to put some more cash out there. Whoops, right? It's hard to follow. It's like the pea and shell game with spinning plates, right, while you're blindfolded. It's a mess. Anyways, I want to thank you very much for taking a look at this board of truth, right? Prep to an all-time high. Dow Jones is at an all-time high. With everything that's going on, how is that possible? Well, Trump needs it, and there is a political tie to this. Trump needs it to be strong. He needs something strong that he can point to, and everyone in the politics loves to point to Wall Street because that's your retirement. That's the investment world. That's where you get to take it easy and cruise down easy street when you finally get to age 70 and you're so fucking exhausted and worn out and beat tired and used and spent that they're going to give you a little bit of your money back, maybe from Social Security, and whatever Wall Street hasn't stolen from you, you get some of that back. Maybe a government pension, maybe a labor union pension, and you get to cruise from age whenever you retire till when? Till you kick the fucking bucket, right? But what happens if we have a collapse, right, of the dollar, of the bond market, international trade? What if we have a collapse and we lose 50% of that? Are you going to have a job? Are you going to have a bank account? Right? Are you going to have any stock, any value in it? If everyone else is selling their stocks on Wall Street, what do you think yours is worth? Nobody's lining up to buy them, so the price just comes down. Price comes down. Right? There goes your retirement. Oh, by the way, government pensions, labor union pensions, where do you think that money is sitting? Do you think it's sitting in a bank, getting killed by inflation? No, those dollars are sent over to Wall Street, whether it's a private management firm, private corporation, whether it's a government pension. Right? That money is stored. It's invested in Wall Street. So all the money you send there, plus all the money you send there in your 401k and matching by your company 401k, goes to Wall Street, where of course they take their little bits out, their fees, their 1% fee a month or 1% fee a year, whatever it is. It's a lot of fucking money for doing nothing. Anyways, if Wall Street collapses, there goes your government pension, your private pension, your 401k. There goes everything. Poof. You've got no retirement. This is a wealth transfer scheme is what it is. Right? The money is sucked out of the economy. The money is sucked out of you. So where's the safe haven? Where is the real safe haven? As a prepper, food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. Those are things you buy, you possess. They can't be taken away. If shit hits the fan, you're going to need those items. If you've got extra money, gold and silver. Not paper gold, but gold and silver. Owning your wealth in your hands. Owning your wealth in your hands. You own it. When everything else crashes, what happens to gold and silver? Up. 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 Double, triple, quadruple. Why? Because it's real wealth. Gold has always been money. Gold has not always been a barbarous relic. They made that lie up to make the dollar sound good, to make the bond market sound important, to make Wall Street look good, to say you need these commodities to keep the economy going. And we do need oil. And the government does need to use bonds. Right? But Wall Street, do we need stocks in companies? See, companies used to issue stock in exchange for money to fund what they do. Now it's a gambling, bartering game, right? It's about betting on whether or not Company X is going to do better. Well, Company X may do better today and may suck tomorrow. It's a gamble. When you own gold and silver, it's real. When the dollar was based on gold and silver, the dollar was real. And so were bonds. If you knew a bond is worth X amount of dollars and you knew that dollar was worth X amount of silver and gold, you could buy all these things, and it was a very cohesive, stable system with no inflation, because it's always based off of how much gold is there. That's what we're hoping comes back, as a stable, solid system, right? And we also need government restricted so they don't do deficit spending. I mean, it's literally a crime what the government does by spending money. Not only the feds, but the state, the counties, the cities that are in debt. Just talking to a friend today on the phone, city over in the Bay Area, up to its eyeballs just in the last couple of terms, political terms, with debt. It's choking city, county, state, and the feds. They should not be allowed to do deficit spending where they charge us extra interest just so they can stay in business and continue to overspend. Right? 21 trillion, that's just the federal government. Right? Anyways, this is our economy. Right? This is how the system works. They're spinning plates on sticks. And at some point, it's going to quit working because they exhaust one of these things and it goes out of balance. Right? Anyways, thank you very much. Thank you for sponsoring us here at Patreon. Thank you very, very much. It's amazing what is going on out there, and I'm glad that we can bring you news, opinion, news editorial, right? I guess you could call this education. This is what my brain looks like when I wake up in the morning. I get a cup of coffee and it starts spinning, right? What's going to happen today? Anyways, the Dow Jones needs to be up because Trump needs to get elected. He needs to have something good to point to. The Democrats need it to come down. They need Trump to look bad, right? If Trump can keep it up there and get through this election and not have a Democrat take over and end up with a bunch of impeachment bullshit, right, then he's good. But at some point, they've got to stop spinning the plates and they've got to correct the system and get us a real system set up. They need to get rid of the Federal Reserve, right? There's so many things that people who care about this nation say need to happen. But the people in charge, government and the banks, Federal Reserve, say, we don't want that. You need our crappy, fake, phony dollars, which are tied to inflation and funding the government through deficit spending so they can continue to make more and more money, transfer your wealth to them, right? No, it shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't be transferring our wealth to banks. We should be transferring it and keeping our economy strong. Our economy needs to be strong so it can fund the government and pay us, and we work for it. And the economy works for us, and we work for the economy, and government collects a little bit of taxes. Anyways, once again, this is it. Board of Truth. Thanks again. Chance favors the prepared mind is yours. You know, once I put all this, I was like, I can explain this so easy. I'll explain this. I'll put it out there so everyone will get it so easy, just like that. And the more I put down about how the system works, the more I went, oh, fuck. I can't believe this, you know. No wonder nobody gets it. No wonder. But if you start with any one sector and take the graft and the theft and the lies out of it and made it solid, whether it's the dollar, you know, the banking system, make it a real banking system, solidify everything one piece at a time, we could have a world that works. As it is, too much corruption, too much incompetence, right? And so we're going to have to do it the hard way, I guess. Anyways, prep to an all-time high. If the Dow's at an all-time high, you need to prep to an all-time high. Get it. Food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. Get a plan. Don't get caught off guard by these clowns. And boy, I got to tell you, the clowns are spinning the plates as hard and fast as they can. Godspeed to you all, and Semper Fi.